This is the Four Principles, Season 2, Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be drawing on Season 1, Chapter 9 of the Four Principles and integrating the Tree of Life, addendum with regards to Fermat's principle. In Season 1, Chapter 9, we talked about how higher resonance frequencies shape consensus to a greater degree. We talked about how structures attain resonance by emotional coupling, mirroring and common tension release. We talked about how unshared postural releases produce nonlinear intersections, which lead to competitive exchanges in nonlinearity. These nonlinear exchanges lead to either overcoming fear to attain a higher resonance frequency, or the expression of hierarchical aversions to fall out of that resonance frequency. In the Tree of Life, the addendum, we talked about how reverse substitution events represent the flowing through of consciousness through all vessels. And the negation, at the conclusion of the reverse substitution event, represents a new medium through which that consciousness must flow. You can imagine that consciousness, just as light does, tests all possible paths through that medium to find the path of least action. In Season 26, Chapter 5 of the Tree of Life, we talk about Fermat's principle that states that the path taken by a ray of light is the path that can be traveled in the least time. This was used to explain the ordinary refraction of light. We applied this principle to sequential substitution events, where acquiescence precedes negation followed by acquiescence. In that episode, we talked about how Fermat's principle is a fundamental property of waves, such as consciousness flowing through many vessels exhibits this property. And since the unshared postural release represents negation, we can see that what we see with sequential substitution events follows an unshared postural release in a structure, which is at a certain resonance frequency. Thus, as a structure member exhibits an unshared postural release, consciousness is transmitted to a new medium, that experienced within nonlinearity, where the path that you recall is path parsimony, that is the simplest path, whereas outside the medium what is remembered is time parsimony, that is the simplest path of time. That is what we see in Season 1, Chapter 6 of the Four Principles, with respect to the present being transcribed into the past. Mediated by nonlinear intersections, shows that ultimately time parsimony, that perceived outside the nonlinear medium, supersedes path parsimony, that is the path remembered by the subject. Thus, what we describe in Season 23, Chapter 8, of the Tree of Life, with respect to the negation acting as a weak measurement in sequential substitution events, and the final acquiescence acting as a measurement reversal applies likewise to unshared postural releases at a given resonance frequency. In other words, in a structure at a given resonance frequency, the unshared postural release acts as a weak measurement on the action of the subject, followed by a competitive exchange within nonlinearity, which leads to acquiescence measurement reversal, which preserves coherence. This acquiescence is either to the hierarchical aversions, or to the tautological impulse negated in overcoming fear. That is, hierarchical flow and tautological flow maintain parallel, but distinct coherence. Finally, we can see that within the competitive nonlinear exchange following an unshared postural release, time parsimony predicts that action follow the path of least time, which means that higher dimensions of time and nonlinear time can permit the actions of subjects. This is why we see linear time dissolve during these nonlinear intersections. That's the end of the podcast for today.